Good morning, Dan and Amy. It's Amy's birthday. Happy birthday, Amy. And
more importantly, it's your dad's birthday. More importantly, it's Veterans Day.
Of course, yes, that's right.
Thank you to all who have served.
Absolutely. And taking your calls and texts all morning, playing Guess Amy's Age. It was her idea.
Oh, my gosh.
It was your idea. Don't put it on me. Come on. Don't put it on me.
Before or after the augmentation.
Exactly. Yeah, right. And it is Veterans Day, so it's a good time to talk about rebuilding our military, the state of military readiness with all the threats we face. It's also a good time to talk about things like the Iranian nuclear deal, since the International Atomic Energy said Iran violated the nuclear deal again. Second violation since the implementation of the agreement in January. The issue is Iranians' use of excess heavy water material used in the production of weapons-grade plutonium, for like WMDs. And according to State Department spokesman, Iran has made no attempt to hide it, and they're taking immediate steps to address it. So it's not a formal violation of the nuclear deal, says the Obama regime, of the Iranian regime, but the IAEA says it is a violation of the deal. So let's get some clarity here by finding out what Fox News national security analyst KT McFarland, the Secretary of State designee, thinks about that. KT McFarland, thanks for joining us. We appreciate it.
Well, let me correct one thing. Not Secretary of State designee. However, you are absolutely correct on Iran. They are violating the deal. The problem is that the Obama administration, and probably the worst treaty we have ever negotiated in American history, not a treaty, but the worst deal we've ever negotiated in American history, has given Iran everything up front. It gave them the money. It gave them the sanctions relief. It gave them the prestige. It gave them everything they wanted, and particularly gave them a legal path to have nuclear weapons within a decade. And it gave it all up front, and so we have very little leverage left directly with Iran. Obama will make a couple of speeches scolding them, but they could care less. They can violate the agreement tomorrow, and they already got what they want.
Can Trump walk it back in? Because the EU foreign policy chief said yesterday that this was a resolution approved by the UN Security Council, and thus there is no possibility it can be changed by a single country's government.
Well, we could do some things to make it more difficult. I mean, we could use the U.S. banking system to try to freeze Iran out of the international banking system, all of which runs on dollars. But the reality of it is whatever we would do, we would probably do alone. For example, Iran and France have now agreed that France is going to invest in Iran and help them rebuild a lot of their aging oil facilities. So, the train's already left the station. What could we do to stop Iran? One of the biggest problems to me of the Iran nuke deal, not only did we give them everything they wanted, but we didn't tie it to any behavior. It wasn't as if they had to give up their support of terrorism. They had to give up their support of Hezbollah. They had to give up their constant refrain to death to America. What we could do at this point is try to embolden and encourage and strengthen Iran's natural adversaries in the region, like Egypt, like the Gulf Arab states.
So when Donald Trump won the campaign trail, he said his first day in office, within the first few hours, he's going to tear up the Iranian deal with the agreement. But it's a 6-party agreement, and we can't.
But we could still, Amy. We could still say we're going to tear up the American part of the agreement. That's not a treaty.
Right.
It's an agreement that President Obama signed by executive order. That's an Obama agreement. That's not an American agreement. So there is stuff we could do, but it would be less effective than if we had gotten everybody on board. We had tied Iran's behavior to the goodies that we were giving them. So there is stuff to do.
We could reimpose sanctions rather than financing the regime.
Well, that would be a good first step, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. I do. Let me ask you a question, KT, with President-elect Trump. The names being bandied about for various national security and defense posts as well as Secretary of State, Newt Gingrich for Secretary of State has been mentioned. Former Michigan Congressman Mike Rogers, retired Army Lieutenant General Mike Flynn is in the mix. as are others. Some of the names that you hear being floated that you think would be would serve the Trump administration well, regardless of exactly who lands in which post.
This always happens after an election. Is everybody, who's going to get what job? And particularly in this environment where Donald Trump is the first president since George Washington who arrives at the White House not owing anybody anything.
Mm-hmm.
So there's I've got to give this group something. I've got to give their cheerleader something else. I mean, Donald Trump earned this on his own, and it was the biggest political earthquake, in centuries.
Yeah, but doesn't he always surrogate something? I mean, the people that supported him.
I mean, I'm sure that the people who agree with him, he would probably want to have around him. But the fact that we're now focused on who's going to get this job, who's going to get that job, it's the wrong focus. The focus is on Donald Trump. This guy has just pulled off an earthquake. He has gone against the Republican establishment, the Democratic establishment, the Clinton and Bush political machines, which have controlled their party's politics for the last generation. He's gone against the mainstream media. He's gone against Wall Street, and he's managed to beat them all. And so the focus should be really on him and the policies that he wants. And as far as any of those people, myself included, anybody be honored to serve. I was a foot soldier in the Reagan Revolution. I know what it's like to shake things up. It's a great place to be. And there is no guy who's shaken things up more than Donald Trump.
Well, right. And you want to look at this, though, because it's going to take more than him and Jeff Sessions to, put this all together.
But these are all really good people.
Right.
They're all smart. They're all good. They've all been surrogate campaigners with him. They're all people who are on the same page as he is on policies. The need to defeat radical Islam, the need to stand up to the Chinese, the need to figure out a way to not have another Cold War with Russia, the way to stop Iran. So I think they would all be good.
Well,
but the guy making the decisions is not going to be them. It's going to be Donald Trump.
Well, so thinking about that and thinking about, the proverbial first 100 days or the first couple of things that he's going to do in the international arena, one seems to be some type of action, whatever America can do with respect to this unholy deal with Iran. What else needs to be front and center for him in the first forays?
He's already said he's going to go to the generals and say, give me a plan in 30 days. How do you defeat ISIS? And I think by ISIS, it's the bigger, how do you defeat radical Islam? And he's already said in one of his speeches that it's not just a matter of throwing a bunch of troops at it. It's the whole picture. It's the way we defeated the Nazis in World War II or the communists during the Cold War. It has a military component, sure, but not that you necessarily go to war. But it has an ideological component. It has a cyber component in this case. It has an economic component. So I think that would be another priority. He's also said the Chinese aren't going to push us around anymore. And Hillary famously said, well, you can't get tough with your banker. I think Donald Trump has every intention of getting tough with the banker and making him no longer the banker, because the other point is that by having a pro-growth, pro-jobs platform economy, that starts succeeding. And as Reagan learned in the 1980s, once you fix the economy and rebuild American military and the defenses, you have options and opportunities and leverage that you didn't have before.
Now, KT McFarland, I know you don't want to talk about positions, but has anybody from the Trump campaign or the Trump administration reached out to you personally for maybe a meeting, maybe a cup of coffee over the weekend?
It's her birthday. She gets to ask that question.
I think a lot of people have been contacted by the Trump transition team and presidential appointments, because Trump's going to cast a big net. It's not going to be the same old, same old. He ran against the same old, same old. So I think that you'll see a lot of names that you might not otherwise have thought made sense, but then when you look at it a second time, those names make a lot of sense. And he's a businessman. He also knows people in the business world, which most politicians only know them in the donor sense. They don't know them as far as their abilities.
I know, you're in the circles of influence there. So if you get the chance, I'm just spitballing here, just a suggestion with the idea of imposing maximum punishment on the D.C. press corps. Think about seeing if you can get Dick Cheney to be the State Department spokesman. Wouldn't that be fun?
I think that what this election has shown, though, Dan, in all seriousness, is what's the role of the mainstream media? They took a side on this, and their side lost. And we already know that print newspapers are dying. print journalism is dying. So what takes its place? Is it Twitter? Is it Facebook? Is it some online form of journalism? Everybody's still going to always listen to talk radio, so you guys are in good shape.
Yeah, thank goodness.
But I think there should be an enormous amount of soul-searching in the media, the traditional mainstream media, about not only how relevant are we, how biased are we, but what's our future?
Well, right.
Well,
It's not the format; it's the content that they get wrong. I mean, that's the problem. You can put bad content through a wonderful channel, and it's still bad content, and that seems to me what so much of the old media is missing. But let me ask you another question, though, too, just in terms of comparisons. I know some of these comparisons are tortured, but just Trump's kind of visceral perspective, in addition to the elevation of Theresa May as prime minister in England. You know where I'm going.
You bet.
Are we looking at sort of Reagan-Thatcher undercard here?
Or we're looking at a Churchill, Franklin Rose, FDR. You know, one of the things that I found fascinating in the Brexit vote was that it was done again, in some cases, against what was said to be people's financial self-interest. In other words, they voted not because they thought they were going to get rich by the Brexit vote, but because they wanted their sovereignty back. And what it does is I think, and I've not mentioned this to President-elect Trump or anybody who's, on the transition, any of those people, but the opportunity for the United States to have a new relationship with Britain. So not just that the prime minister and the president would be close, but what about a trade deal? What about a Britain-U.S. trade deal? We're not going to have a Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. We're not going to have a European trade deal. The European Union is collapsing in front of our eyes. And so maybe there's a new opportunity there for the United States and Great Britain to not only be political and strategic allies, but economic allies as well.
All right. She is K.T. McFarland, former State Department Pentagon official, of course, and national security analyst for Fox News. KT, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, guys.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.